everybody. Happy summer. We're finally in summer. Welcome to another amazing Progressive Grocer webinar. My name is Gina Acosta. I'm the editor-in-chief of Progressive Grocer, and I'm going to be your host for today's event. So today's webinar is called The Omni Strategies That Grocers Need Now. And that's all about winning share in the grocery channel today, which now requires a winning strategy for the myriad challenges that retailers are facing, things like finicky consumer behavior, economic volatility, and maybe most important, disruptive technologies. So that's why we have the Vice President of Research at PG's parent company, EnsembleIQ, Beth Brickel, and the Vice President of Retail Checkout, Product and Strategy at NCR Voyix, Amit Acharya, here today to go deep into the data from our 9th annual Grocery Tech Trends Study. Progressive Grocer's super comprehensive annual report analyzes technology transformation in the grocery industry, both from the food retailer perspective and the consumer perspective as well. And it aims to really give retailers an idea of how to prepare for what's next in this ever fast changing industry. So before I introduce our speakers, I'd like to just cover a few housekeeping items. First, the views of the speakers and their organizations are their own and do not necessarily reflect those of Progressive Grocer or its parent company, EnsembleIQ. Second, the webinar, the audio for this webinar is streamed through your computer or mobile device. So make sure to unmute your speakers and turn the volume up. Finally, third, one of our goals is to make sure this session is as interactive as possible. You can use the Q&A function on the left side of your screen below the presenter headshots to ask questions throughout the webinar. I'll hold those questions until the end of the presentation and then pose them on your behalf. Your identity will remain completely confidential to the audience, so don't worry about that. But if we don't have time to answer all the questions, we will follow up with you later after the session concludes via email. You can also use this section if you have any technical questions about the webinar itself, and you will get a direct reply from our wonderful webinar producer, Valletta. And finally, an on-demand version of this webinar will be available a few hours after our session concludes, so please feel free to watch it again and share. And by the way, if you're interested in a copy of the presentation, if you go to the event resources tab on progressivegrocer.com, that presentation will be available there as well for you to download. So, and trust me, I think that once you see how comprehensive this report is, you will want to get a copy of this presentation. So speaking of which, let me now introduce our most excellent speakers here today. So here today is Beth Brickel, Vice President of Research at EnsembleIQ's Insights and Innovation Division. Beth brings 20 years of market and customer research experience to EnsembleIQ, and she holds a Master's of Marketing Research degree from Southern Illinois University. Her industry experience spans CPG, retail, restaurant, healthcare, education, media, and nonprofits. A REVA-trained moderator, Beth has conducted interviews, focus groups, online discussion groups, ethnographies, and shop-alongs with hundreds of individuals across both B2B and B2C studies. Also here today is Amit Acharya, Vice President, Retail Checkout Product and Strategy at NCR Voyix. Amit leads strategy, execution, and go-to-market for the $1 billion plus portfolio. His prior product management roles span varied scales of businesses such as Gigster, IBM, and more. Amit is passionate about solving for unmet customer needs by being scrappy with design and technology. Be it product or people, he takes pride in leading with empathy. One of his core principles is rooted in his philosophy that, quote, technology is temporary, relationships are forever. My goodness, that is so awesome, Amit. And, you know, is there anything more important in the grocery channel right now other than, you know, fostering, creating, and retaining relationships, right? Okay, guys, so let me just quickly review the agenda for our session today. So first, I'm going to turn the virtual floor over to Beth. She's going to do an amazing job with her presentation, and trust me, I've already seen it, and it's amazing. So while Beth is speaking, however, Amit and I plan to jump in from time to time, you know, with comments and discussion points And then after that, after the presentation is concluded, then we will take your questions. And after that live Q&A portion, then we will wrap up. So that's our plan. And Beth, take it away. It's time for your amazing presentation.
Oh, thank you, Gina. Well, that's a lot to follow, but I appreciate it.
I've already seen it, Beth. I've already seen it. I know it's incredible. So go for it.
Well, thank you. And yes, we do have a lot to cover. This is a great study. My team at EnsembleIQ has been working on this since the beginning of the year. So it's always really so gratifying to be able to finally share the learnings with everyone. So thank you again for allowing me to join with you today. So let's get into it. So as Gina mentioned, this is an annual study. This is the second annual version of this study that we have executed. And what that means, which is always really exciting for us as researchers, and hopefully for you as recipients of this, is that we have the ability to actually look at differences now year over year based on valid measurable data. With this study, something that we are very excited about is that not only do we get the perspective of grocery retailers, which, again, is so valuable, but when we first came up with the concept of this study, we thought, let's also talk to shoppers. So we get both sides. We get the holistic view of what's happening out there, not only from the retailers themselves, but from the shoppers that are shopping those. So that is what we do with this. It's a pretty big study where we conduct a survey of grocery retail leaders. We require that they, indicate through screening that they are very knowledgeable about their company's current and future technology strategies. So we get really good, relevant data and insights from that group. And then we complement that by also surveying over 1,000 shoppers across the United States. And these are individuals that have to confirm that they are the primary or shared decision maker for grocery purchases in their household. And this year we had just over 1,000. We had 1,009, which what's great about that is that, with that large of a sample, we're able to go in there and slice and dice the data and not only look at generally what's happening with shoppers overall, but we're able to also really get in and see where there's differences by certain, characteristics or demographics. In the case of this study that you're about to see, we've looked at some differences by generation. And there's really some, very interesting things that we're seeing there, particularly with our up and coming, Gen Z shoppers that we'll take a look at. One other point I might note, in case some of you do come back and watch the recording or download the presentation that you have access to, is that we also, because this is a year-over-year study, we do indicate where there are significant differences comparing our 2024 data to 2023. You'll see those throughout with these red and green arrows, which I'll speak to as we get into the slides themselves. So to start off with, we'll start off strong. I think, a lot of times I support our entire company with research, and we hear a lot of, the negative of, concerns over costs, inflation, supply chain still being a thing. And we, I was really, great to see when we were looking at the data for this study, we're talking about retailers first, is that they really have a strong positive outlook for tech investments going into 2024 and even beyond into 2025. We asked them, if they compared to 2023, how do they expect their tech investments to look? Are they going to be investing more, about the same, or less? And what we see on this chart here is that 2 out of 3 expect to increase their tech spend in 2024 relative to 2023. When you combine all those blue shades, that's 66%. Conversely, we see only 7% that expect that they're going to be reducing their spend compared to 2023.
I just wanted to ask, sorry,
go
Beth.
ahead.
No. I just wanted to ask Amit what he sees when he talks to retailers about their spend, whether planned spend or.
Yes, absolutely. We fairly consistent in my observations in our conversations as well, Gina and Beth. And as Beth will share ahead, we'll see a significant conversations around data. Right, data is the new currency, as we know, and how you use that currency in your favor to enrich the guest and the retailer experience is the differentiation. So it's pretty in line And we see similar conversations happening across the board when it comes about the front end, the technology that goes into the front end of the store, and how to drive more foot traffic and connect the channel experiences across digital channels versus store channels. It's all unified and connected now as we see it. So fairly consistent here.
That's great. Wonderful. And kind of speaking to that, so we in the survey, we also wanted to understand a bit more in terms of, those investments and where they expected to be making priorities. And so on this, you see that we asked them to kind of indicate on a spectrum across, 3 different pairs. Where do they expect to be focusing more in 2024? We kind of framed a lot of these questions as the next 12 to 18 months. So if we want to think about, this was administered in March, April. So looking into kind of about this time next year, where do they expect to be? And what we see at the very top is that, more are focused on back-end tech in stores versus tech in warehouses and distribution centers. We see nearly half, 48%, saying they're going to focus more on that back-end tech in the stores, where a third, nothing to sneeze at, a third are focusing more on back-end tech in warehouses and distribution centers, but definitely seeing that skew towards the in-stores. We see about a similar balance between customer-facing and back-end tech there in the middle. But then at the bottom too, I thought this was really exciting to see, is this 41% that are focused on implementing new tech. And when you couple that with the 25% that are looking at about an equal focus between upgrades to existing or new tech, when we combine that, that's again about 2 out of 3 that are really looking at implementing some new technology solutions in their stores in the next 12 to 18 months. So what are some of those things? I think, Amit, you already spoke to some of these, but this is also what we saw in our data too, is when we asked retailers, where they expect, what they expect to be driving the most growth in the grocery industry in those next 12 to 18 months. We gave them a list of options to choose from, and they could select all from this list. And what I thought was interesting is that we had 3 areas that were tied for first, with half of our retailers saying that these are going to be an area where they expect, these are facets that they expect to be driving growth. That's a combination of data analytics tools, e-commerce and online ordering, and then AI and machine learning too. So all of those are right there at the top, selected by half of our retailers as an expected growth driver in the industry. I also want to call out the one that's following right after that with that 41%, which is tech to solve workforce challenges. And I just want to highlight that because this is going to be a theme you're going to see in subsequent slides too. We are seeing still a lot of concerns around, labor and the challenges around retention and training. So this certainly showed that too, is that they think that there's going to be, that relying on tech solutions to help address some of those persistent challenges.
Yeah, Beth, and I wanted to ask Amit, perfect. Amit, please jump in and, talk to us about what you hear about those labor challenges from retailers.
No, I totally agree. And Gina, to your point earlier, right, it boils down to the experiences. Retailers are focusing on how to enhance and enrich the experience, and that's why data becomes key, as I mentioned earlier. Data is a new currency. Data conversation can't be done without the mention of AI and ML today, and also connected architectures. How do you build connected stores? And retailers are seeking real-time information that helps them with just-in-time insights to do 3 things. Think about driving the top line, informed upsells and promotions and awareness of new products. Think about driving experience I talked about earlier. How can you do A/B tests of user experience and drive brand differentiations across different demographics for more footfall? And last is driving the bottom line, which is lean and agile tech, faster and more predictive of failures that know before you know. How do you use data to your advantage in those 3 segments? And then again, if I touch on some of the other elements here, which you talked about, Beth, tech to solve workforce challenges, right? And even checkout for that matter. We continue to see the uptake on how checkout continues to play an important role in driving that experience for our retailers across the board, across the globe here. So fairly in line here as well.
Absolutely. And on the next slide here, we look at the inverse. We talked about what's driving growth, and now we also wanted to ask our retailers about what do they feel are going to be those top barriers or obstacles to tech investments in the next 12 to 18 months. And what we saw was, most retailers are concerned that inflation or staffing challenges. So there we go, again, hearing about the workforce challenges, those are going to be the two leading challenges or, barriers to tech investments. Also, again, kind of related, price competition, lower margins with 45%, economic recession with just over a third. So it's again, we're seeing some definite, themes in terms of where retailers are really looking to and where they're going to be looking for, solutions to address.
And Beth, I'll jump in here quick on, I think earlier Gina mentioned about a question on labor challenges, and it rightfully. Think about the massive paradigm shift that happened during COVID. The muscle memory of the world changed. We shifted from traditional work behaviors to remote work. And that has accelerated the gig economy. I used to work in Gigster, I mentioned earlier, which was accelerating gig workers in the workforce. And hence, if you look at the various modalities now to drive business, which is buy online, pick up in store, or even pickers and driving cars, right? Uber, for example. Think about that. Labor challenge is here to stay. Labor is hard to come back to scan and pack grocery pack unless there's higher economic benefit. And so the question is, how do we leverage tech smartly, right? The bigger question the retailers have for us and for vendors like us, and where we help them, is how do we make sure the tech does the heavy lifting of automation and removing friction from the journey of the guest. Right, that's key. And the second one I think I see here is changing shopping preferences, which is huge, by the way. Look at some of the store formats evolving, where groceries kind of going into more convenience plus. And if you look at convenience these days, it's much more than just getting fuel, right? It's about hot foods and clean bathrooms and restrooms and amazing experience in convenience stores. So those shopper preferences changing and how the experience are evolving is significantly what's driving these kind of challenges as we see it in the market.
Totally agree, Amit. Sorry, Beth, go ahead.
Oh, no, that's fine. And then just, you're making me think of something too, and I don't have it in this presentation, but again, I'm going to plug, because I know there's going to be more content on Progressive Grocer around this study coming out shortly, but just you were, making me think of the shopper side of this too. We have this, we're going to share some of our shopper learnings, but it's amazing, again, how we're, especially with younger generations, seeing them rely on many more channels other than just traditional grocery for their grocery purchases. We do ask a question of where do you go overall, just where do you go to get groceries? And it's such a diverse set of stores that they are now, patronizing for those. So yeah.
Excellent.
A huge challenge. And to kind of underline that point too, Amit, on the workforce piece, just a couple of points I want to highlight on this slide here. There's a few things on here, and again, you'll all have access to this presentation. But the two, we did ask our retailers how much they agree or disagree with some statements, and I really like to highlight these two on the bottom. These are all about, again, workforce related statements, and we have, my company has the right talent to succeed in the digital future of grocery. And 27% said that they do disagree with that statement. And to see, again, with all the research I do, and we do these 5-point scales, it's very striking for me to see that large of a share in that strongly or somewhat disagree. So that's telling me, again, these retailers are looking for solutions. This is something that they need support in. Similarly, on the bottom, my company's existing frontline workforce specifically can be trained to succeed in a digital grocery environment. There's 20% saying they kind of disagree with that. They need to be convinced. Again, 66% say they agree, but that's a pretty good share, 1 in 5 that say they don't agree that their frontline workforce can be trained to succeed as of now, today. So it's certainly looking for some solutions there. Now, this last section that we covered on was talking at a very high level about investments, but what we do in this survey, which is really exciting, is then we dig deeper into understanding, interest, existing investments already, and then where they're looking to for the future. And we do that with a total of 38 different types of technology. We have customer-facing technology, back-end technology, and then we have a separate section which is more of our really cutting-edge innovative solutions too. So I want to share with you where retailers are today and where they're looking tomorrow. Starting off with customer-facing technologies here. We asked them, which of these technologies do you currently have implemented and which ones are you planning to add in the next 12 to 18 months? And then on the right side of the slide here, you see the combination, the net of the share of retailers that either have it in place already or are planning to add it. And what we do see when we look at all of these options is that mobile app, contactless payment, and in-store digital monitors, when we're looking again about what they're planning to add, where we're going to see some real movement in the next 12 to 18 months, something new, is in those two areas, mobile app, contactless payment, and then in-store digital monitors. I'm going to move through these a little bit quick, but I assure you, again, you'll get access to this. I do also want to call out, though, that this is one of our first arrows. This is a significant difference from last year where we see QR codes have actually decreased year over year, only 7% that are planning to add them. And where we see that is that that's where they have actually moved, shifted from the plan to add to now they are currently implemented. So that's, again, the benefit of doing these studies year over year is we'll continue to see that movement across these other types of technology, I would expect. Now looking at the back end, these again are, the blue is where they have currently implemented technology to address these areas. And then the gray is they plan to add it in the next 12 to 18 months. Some things to highlight here is that, 1 in 4, 27% actually, will add mobile devices, tablets, mobile smartphones for managers. We also see anti-theft and workforce tech solutions. Not surprising given what we covered in the previous section with the workforce tech, that we see 75% that either have it or are going to add it. 25% expect to add it in the next 12 to 18 months. And anti-theft technology, 25%. And this is an area, anti-theft, where we saw a significant increase year over year. And we're going to get into it separately to talk about specifically shrink in stores. We have a whole section on that to really dig into that a bit more. And then lastly, our third section are those new and innovative technologies. And this one is a little bit different because these are so new and innovative. We have a separate option for retailers to select. They can tell us whether it's currently in place, if they're going to add it in the next 12 to 18 months. And then we have this other kind of blue-gray shade on the right that is where they're interested in learning more. So they may not be ready today to incorporate it, but they certainly are looking at it and are interested in learning more. And then the column on the right, again, sums up all of those. So we get a sense of, where the market is on these, where there is the most interest. And so just to kind of summarize, because there's a lot on this slide here, what we see is that adoption of ultra-fast delivery and in-store robotics increased significantly year over year. Those are those green arrows on the slide. While interest looking forward is highest for virtual reality, augmented reality, customer experiences, electronic shelf labels, and digital shelves. And just because that was a lot to cover in those 3 slides, to summarize them, we wanted to kind of look at, again, what really popped in the data in terms of tech solutions that are currently in place and those that are, expected to be implemented in the next 12 to 18 months. And so those on the left, we see the share of retailers that already have a solution in place. And again, the ones that are most, most available is your online ordering and curbside pickup, some form of data analytics platform and reporting tools, digital loyalty program and app. 3 and 4 have that already implemented, as well as online ordering for delivery. Looking ahead to the next year and a half, we see 1 in 4, again, planning to add mobile device tablets for in-store managers, workforce tech and anti-theft tech. And then here at the bottom, those 23%, that indicates 23% of retailers that expect to add there's 3 different types of technology there: mobile app, contactless payment, AI or machine learning for demand forecasting, and electronic shelf labels. And I did want to come back, I think, to one of these two, because Amit, I did want to make sure you had the opportunity to speak to a few of these points, because we did move through those pretty quickly. I apologize. I think I'm ahead of myself here. So now wanted to ask, again, those slides, those covered on 38 different technology types. So we wanted to require our retailers to prioritize, to indicate really what are their top preferences, what are they really, really focused on. This data point on the left, I think, is interesting in that, 89% of retailers overall are planning to upgrade something, upgrade one of their current investments. So there's a lot of upgrades. We talked a lot about new technology solutions, but not lose sight of the fact that, almost 9 in 10 are planning to upgrade something that they already have in place. And so of those technologies that are already in place, what are those top priorities? And here we required them, they could only select up to 3. And what we see again are some similar, themes coming up. Number 1, anti-theft tech, 25% saying that they are planning, that's one of their top priorities for upgrading. And then data analytics, we saw that being a big growth driver in the previous section. And here it is again, 23% saying that it's again going to be a top priority for them in terms of their upgrade list. Workforce tech follows that with 20%. When we think about the plan to add tech, again, we wanted to ask them to really tell us your top priorities. What are those top 3? And we see that electronic shelf labels and smart carts are at the top of the list that retailers plan to add, but it's a real pretty fragmented list. You see that there are a lot of diverse priorities amongst those areas that they're really exploring for plan to add technologies.
All right, Beth, I'm dying to ask Amit a question about ESLs and smart carts and, how he sees them evolving in retail. Amit, please opine.
Yeah, those are my, thank you, Gina. Very active conversations on these topics, and I love them. So think about electronic shelf labels, right? ESLs, these are not new. In certain countries, it has been the way of operation for many years. Take for France, for example, or certain, Eastern European countries as well, like they adopted early on. I think the change in acceleration has come from finding available labor. If you think about, first of all, what are the use case of electronic shelf label? It goes back to what we talked about earlier is, what does a connected store mean as we look into the future? And think about electronic shelf labels, those little labels you see on every shelf in the aisle, you can use to communicate with the pickers who are coming and picking up online groceries for all of us, right? And it's a great way to indicate to them what to find where quickly so that there are efficiencies in the system. Think about the selection process of items on the shelf. Think about dynamic pricing. When we think about produce or items which are perishable, they lose their value very quickly as they're not sold. And in terms of for retailers to make the most of it, this allows them to dynamically change the pricing on those items, including think about geofencing, right? If you know that certain demographic is within a certain zone through beacon or some other tech, again, going back to connected store technologies, then you can play with pricing in a way that allows a good uptake and again, drives brand stickiness because you prefer this store over other stores. I'll also give another example of fusion with camera. Many times what we see in aisles is there are gaps between packages, and using cameras in ESL, retailers can understand, they want to understand gap, and they can understand gap scanning, which then allows them to shelf more items in those gaps for more sale, and hence makes a compelling business case for connected stores. So all in all, ESL is definitely an upward trend when it comes to connected stores, conversation-wise, both efficiencies and experience, not just for shoppers, but for associates as well as pickers. The second interesting topic you talked about is smart cards. It's an interesting experiment right now, given the shift away as we shift from, how do we use tech for driving more, removing more friction and driving more inclusion and providing choice to guests. There are many vendors out there. We hear about retailers as well inquiring and experimenting. As I mentioned, it's a modality. For us, for NCR, we talk about frictionless hybrid, where Self-checkout is a modality. Scan and go from your mobile app is a modality, and so is smart cart. And retailers are looking to serve shoppers in various different ways. Just last week, actually, I was with a few retailers here in Brussels, and we heard feedback around the same, where it's an interesting proposition. They're looking at some experimentation as well. But they're also thinking about what does it mean to charge these smart cards. They come heavy on tech, which is good. Tech is here to solve the problems for the world, right? But now storing these cards and managing and maintaining the cards in a weather-friendly way. So does the ROI make sense? Does the business case work? And I think there is an experimentation that's happening in the market as we speak. So again, I'll go back to modalities. It's a modality amongst many retailers, and it's about, in my opinion, it all goes back to the fundamental outcome that retailers are looking, and when we talk to them about is how to give shoppers a choice and how to bring them back to the stores. So again, interesting conversations, but the trend is right on where you guys, what you're hearing, Beth and Gina. But that's our observations and our best practices as we talk to the retailers here.
Amit, don't you think it's like a very, very, very tiny sliver of customers who would actually experiment with a smart cart?
I want to say it is, and I think it right now it's about how do you, think about experiences of putting items in the smart cart. Great, there are cameras and weight sensors and digital displays. Love it. Now, what happens if you have a kid who throws something in and you're like, wait a minute, those items are stacked. Is the smart cart smart enough to detect that?
Right.
Okay, now you take some item. What happens to itemization basket again? So, you're right. It's a very very thin sliver right now, and it's an experimentation. For example, Just Walkout was also an experimentation in grocery, and we saw the evolution as to where it is. It has, how Amazon is thinking about it now. So, I want to say it's an experimentation. We'll see how the market evolves and retailers see the need, but it's about how do you remove the friction? How do you remove that from itemization, from finalization, from payments across the journey, and going from there.
Okay, Beth, sorry, take it away.
No apology. No, that's great. So kind of on this note of, we started to talk about self-checkout, and that was something that we really wanted to focus on with this study. And I'm kind of starting to bridge into where we also get more of that shopper perspective that we solicited. Because then we'll see those data points about just, the interest in self-checkout from a shopper perspective, but wanted to stay focused for now on the retailer, and we'll get to that. And we just know, we saw anti-theft come up on several slides already now. So with shrink being a growing concern, what is the future for self-checkout at grocery?
So Beth, actually, I want to ask Amit about this, talking about checkout sort of broadly. Amit, what do you see, or how do you see the guest experience and shrink, as Beth mentioned, being discussed as part of your conversations with retailers when it comes to checkout?
I'm getting excited because in my list of passionate topics, many passionate topics, this is one of that passionate topic about shrink in general, because there is a lot of press about it. And I'll say, it's not something to shy away from talking about, or even thinking about, or even getting educated about. It's actually, embracing it. And when we talk to our retailers, we actually tell them, first of all, let's take a pause, right? Let's talk about shrink. What does shrink mean? Shrink means loss of inventory. A loss of inventory could happen in various ways. It has been happening in various ways before checkout or self-checkout is where it is today. So I'll give you a couple of examples. Poor labeling on a package good. For example, a label got eroded and now you can't account for that inventory. That's shrink. My son, 10-year-old, my daughter 8, sometimes they take an item from a shelf, they don't like it, and they put on a different shelf. Before I came into this role, I don't think I used to care about it as much, but now I do. So I tell them, go back and put it on the same shelf. That is loss of inventory. It isn't accounted for. Poorly trained attendant, unintentional misscans where somebody literally by mistake, and happens with my kids again, they forget to scan something, is shrink. It's a loss of inventory. And then there is theft, right? There's a portion where organized crime or, people, may get excited about, hey, I didn't get I could do this, so I want to do this more. So I think it boils down to truly understanding the outcome and educating yourself, loss prevention teams, and be thoughtful about the front end. So retailers are trying to understand, and what we do is we educate them holistically on the front end and the back end and across the aisles, right? If somebody wants to steal, let's say, they can steal very easily in the aisle as well when it comes to shrink. So SCO is much more prevalent now. Loss prevention teams earlier were secondary functions in terms of just overall losses, but now they're primary stakeholder in taking a holistic view as we talk about shrink in general. And going back to the guest experience, right? I mean, everything, and I want to say a retailer does rotates around the guest experience. If your guest experience is compromised, I mean, that's a significant loss on top line, bottom line, and in general, just the brand itself, right? And any tech or design or training of the attendant front end pretty much rotates around guests. So it's pretty key in terms of defining that experience, in my opinion. So, and I'm happy to talk, like as I said, SCO is more prevalent now, so we can continue to talk about anti-theft as we move forward here.
Perfect. Thank you, Amit. Go ahead, Beth. Sorry.
No, that's great. I do appreciate that. That was actually helpful for me too. So thank you for that. Just a few more data points that we got from our retailers on this topic. We asked them specifically, about shrink, which again, I appreciate Amit giving us that broader, what that all incorporates there. I think that's very helpful. And, what we heard from those, and this includes retailers that are either have self-checkout in place or they are planning to incorporate it. 91% said they are concerned about this. So it is a big topic. And furthermore, 60% selected those top 2 boxes on our 5-point scale. There's 60% are extremely or very concerned. So it is something that they're looking for support and solutions on. And what have they done today? Well, 67%, 2 out of 3 have already saying that they're implementing some shrink prevention tech at self-checkout. And 61% are, going to even be looking to do more than what they're already doing, taking additional steps to prevent shrink at self-checkout. And we asked those that said they were going to be doing that, give us what are you going to be doing? And heard a lot of things, but, some themes definitely popped to the top. And it included, use of AI, camera-based tech, and then also coming back to the workforce piece of it that we've touched on already, but focused on how can we have more staff available, but also make sure that they're the staff that we do have is appropriately trained.
Hey, Amit, what are you hearing about anti-theft sentiments with respect to self-checkout? Anything else to add?
Yeah, 100%. And I think this is where it gets even more interesting, right? So, within the overall shrink, I would say, conversation, there is this theft conversation around shrink, right?
Right.
Now, if you think about it at checkout, right, which is what this slide is about, I mentioned about unintentional shrink happening on, which is where somebody forgets about, scanning an item. And how do you nudge? So there is no one, everybody's looking for a silver bullet, so to say. Checkout is important. You want to check out, I was with retailers last week, as I mentioned, and they are rolling self-checkout. They want to continue to drive more self-checkout, and we continue to see the demand of self-checkout. However, there is no silver bullet. There is no one technology or one solution that says, put this camera here, and great, now, suddenly I'm able to, get rid of what I'm seeing in my store. You have to understand that there are multiple elements involved in a checkout. There is a front end, which is your, where I would come and go check out. There is a SCO attendant who is responsible for helping me guide as I'm checking out. And there is technology. The job of technology is to remove the pain in the system, right? So in terms of unintentional shrink happening, there is technology available. For example, we have developed organically a pick list, right? Where if you put a banana, it automatically shrinks your pick list to just show you 2 yellow things. So even by mistake, you only see a banana, you don't pick something else. So you make those mistakes and you can nudge, you can design your software in such a way, you can nudge innocent shoppers to do the right thing. And once you train them, we are humans, we learn very fast. And we see a lot of shrink or a lot of misscans or a lot of mistakes happening on a poorly designed experience are taken care very quickly. And then there is this conversation about theft, right? True theft, where somebody is intentionally trying to steal. Think about it. Why do we steal? Because an item is attractive, a bottle of wine. Okay, great. So there is the attractiveness of the item. There is willingness of a defender, which is, is your tech defending? And there's a guardian, an associate who's armed with the right technology to then intervene in a very humble, very, very open way and say, hey, is there something wrong here? How can I help? So think about attendant as an effective guardian. So what we've done is from our perspective, when we talk to retailers, it's a lot about educating the retailers. If you look at the media, yes, there's a lot of negative press about it, but it's about understanding that it's not a single silver bullet that can address shrink. And what we've done is we've designed a wall of defense. A wall of defense is a lot of bricks, right? So we first benchmark the retailer. Where exactly shrink is happening? Maybe it's in the back of the aisle or back of the store or front of the store. Where is it happening? And then what are the bricks we can put, whether it's your user experience, whether these are soft nudges, whether it's a camera solution, whether it's an attendant who's poorly trained, who's not even paying attention and looking around. So it's triangulation of multiple signals and sensors and operational excellence, which is what helps retailers to then drive much more throughput and a very amazing experience. So, and that's what we tell retailers, don't shy away from shrink or read a bad press and realize that, oh my God, embrace it, understand it. And once you're educated enough, then you are much more aware on how to act and where to act. So I'm very passionate about this topic. So I hope this was helpful.
It was, Amit. Thank you so much. Beth?
Very much, yes. All right, we're going to now take a look at what our shoppers told us in the study as well. And what, again, I mentioned it in the upfront, we had the ability to look at this by generation. And what we saw as a big takeaway was that our younger shoppers are particularly tech savvy, and they're going to be driving demand for digital solutions at grocery. So what does this look like? This first, I mentioned we're going to the shoppers, but I'm going to give you one more slide that features data from our retailers, because what we did in this survey was we asked a question of retailers, and then we asked a similar question of our shoppers to see if there's any gaps between where retailers are and where shoppers are. And so we asked the question of retailers, what will grocery shoppers value most over the next 12 to 18 months? And we gave them a list of options to choose from. And what we saw, from left to right, retailers predict shoppers will most value offerings that are going to save them costs. Makes sense. 66% said more digital discounts and promotions. But then also the next one, not far behind that, is this hybrid grocery experience where I can have tech for convenience and information, but also that human touch when I want it. So those were the top two, and then we see that followed by enhanced prepared food offerings, improved online shopping experience. Those are kind of our top four.
So Amit, I don't know if you want to talk about, I know that you like to talk a lot about the hybrid frictionless experience. And I think a lot of the trends here validate, how you see the shopper journey evolving. So just wanted to ask if you had any insights.
Absolutely. Think about retail. Retail is all about humans, right? We are psychological beings, and it's about humans and human behavior. We go, we shop, we check out, and change in that journey is an evolution. It's not a revolution. And how do you change that behavior depends upon how you remove the friction, starting from the point you've done your journey, finished your journey, and now you're checking out. So the key is how we ensure every shopper feels delighted to the checkout, and hence the data here reflects that, right? The role of tech is just to do that. It's about the guest. Some guests may use mobile shoppers, some may prefer different modalities, and then still go and prefer to close a transaction on self-checkout. So that's how the retailers globally, when they talk to us about tech per se specific, right? We go back to the outcome. Your outcome is to have an amazing experience for your guests and include them, right? Include somebody who's a millennial, who's a Gen Z, or how do you include them? And somebody wants to talk, somebody doesn't want to talk, and it all goes back to having the right operational excellence along with tech and the right attendant trained in a way to serve that shopper. So no, I think it's fairly aligned in that manner.
And on the flip side now, because I think that this is a nice transition to this next slide, this is that shopper point of view on what do they say they themselves will value most over the next 12 to 18 months. And we see those top two are consistent. So we see more digital discounts and promotions for 52%, but followed by 32% saying that, yes, that hybrid grocery experience is going to remain important for us over the next 12 to 18 months. And I'll call special attention to, we did flag some of these areas where we saw differences by generation. The purple arrows are the share of Gen Z and millennials that said that they will value those specific areas that they are pointing to. But what I always find interesting is where we see, similar sentiment regardless of generation. And that's, again, where those digital discounts and promotions and those hybrid grocery experience, that's equally important across all shoppers. But it's important as we're also looking to the future that, cashless, contactless checkout options in particular, this was one where compared to what we heard from retailers, they had more of the prepared food offerings and the online shopping experience rated a little bit higher in terms of what they thought shoppers were looking for. And while, again, I think they're all, important, we do see that for shoppers, when it's their turn, they are really, we saw number 3 being that contactless checkout options being important. And that, again, is being driven by our younger shoppers, with 47% of Gen Z saying that's something they're going to value over the next year and a half.
And Beth, I just want to quickly, I just want to go back here. Quickly, I want to jump and I'll go back to the comment made earlier about data, right? The investment in data. Think about why the tech trend is towards investment in data. And that goes back to digital promotions, personalized recommendations, improved online shopping experience, and then interactive in-store tech. These all tie in. And if you think about many retailers are looking to drive more engagement on self-checkout in a way that you can choose to place an order online, and then you walk into a store and you think about still shopping, you're still connected, you still have a seamless experience across both the journeys, and then you choose to check out using self-checkout. While checking out, you get promotions, you get digital coupons in your wallet that happens on self-checkout, and then you walk out of the store, right? And all of these gets connect together through a seamless platform that kind of backs it. And that's what retailers are looking at. So it's fairly aligned in terms of, if you map this to the investment by the retailers, you can see how they connect, even though they're coming from two different personas. Right? One is retailers and one is shoppers giving you this data. And this is what we're hearing as well. So quite triangulation out here. So I'm going to call that out for our audiences.
Great, I appreciate that. One thing that we always want to keep an eye on with shopping now, especially after the pandemic, we started to really track this, but we've continued to do it, is just understanding how shoppers are shopping. And this is specific to groceries. So in-store shopping, that's at the very top, those 2 bars. That's either you shop in-store and check out with a cashier, or you shop in-store and use the self-checkout. And how often are you shopping that way? And there's a lot on this slide, but a few points that I'll call out is that, again, 85% are shopping in-store or checking out with a cashier once a month or more often, but equally as many, 84% are shopping in-store and using a self-checkout once a month or more often. And when we talk about our shopping online, those are the bottom 4 bars there. Shopping online for delivery in particular, we're seeing that once a month gain significantly. That is now 43% of shoppers that say they are shopping for groceries and getting them delivered once a month or more often. So that's something to certainly keep an eye on. I think the other point here too, my green arrows, is 7% that are now saying they're shopping in store and using self-checkout daily. Again, just to see that grow year over year just shows, again, how that's becoming more of a preferred method for today's shoppers. And one other piece here too, this is the same question, but just to drive home the point when we're talking about the next generation of shoppers, the bars at the top are our in-store shopping methods, and then the bars at the bottom are our online shopping methods. And what we see there is, looking at basically on the bottom, you see our Gen Z through our boomer shoppers. Just again, younger shoppers are relying on more methods. They're definitely more heavily using those online methods for shopping compared to our Gen X and certainly our Boomer shoppers. So that's, again, just to bring home the point of where the future of grocery is moving.
So Amit, let me just ask you, self-checkout continues to be, super popular, but how do retailers look at it when it comes to different demographics?
I think I'll mention that. And I'm tying the trend here, right? Which, by the way, shows that 83+% continue to use self-checkout. And if you look at the decline in other trends post-COVID, goes back to my comment earlier that at the end of the day, we are humans. We want to go to the stores and we want to, engage and drive. Now, self-checkout does not mean lack of service. Rather, self-checkout is about speed and delight to checkout, right? How do you give speed to the generation that's looking for speed, or for people who are looking for speed, and how do you give delight for those who wants to engage in a way that allows them to see value in terms of talking to somebody and such. It's not about forcing people to adopt, rather providing an experience they feel they want to adopt. It's about the right tech, right training for the self-checkout host, and whether they need assistant or someone who just wants to grab and go, right? And retailers know that, and that's where we help them, and we work together on designing that front end, the flow of the guest, the technology, the tenant, and all of that has to work in harmony. And that's how, Gina, to your question, we include all the demographics: cash, card, coupon, EBT. There's so many modalities and variabilities within that whole demographic, and you can't exclude anyone, because if you do, then you stop seeing shoppers coming to your store. And that's what it takes to think of it as a holistic. It's not a lack of service, rather it's about speed and delight to check out.
Thanks, Amit.
Just again, one more point too. We asked very directly of all of our shoppers, what's your preferred method for checking out? And again, we've seen now year over year that the self-checkout with the kiosk is number one, 45% of all shoppers, followed by 40% saying the traditional checkout with cashier. And we do have the just walk out cashier list. We're tracking that one as well, but that's still hovering about 1 in 10 shoppers that say that's their preferred method. So, and I agree with what Amit is saying too. The service still has to be baked in there, because I don't think any shopper is going to, even if it's more convenient, I still think that, they would not prefer that method if it wasn't also a positive experience from a service perspective. And just highlighting again for all of you the generational difference as we're looking to the future. 68% of Gen Z say that self-checkout with kiosk is their preferred method, and 54% of millennials. One thing just to note how shoppers are feeling about shopping in general and what their top pain points are. When shopping inside a store, we see out of stock products is still number one compared to last year, but it's dropped a little bit. It's significantly dropped. It's now 48% of shoppers indicating that's a pain point. So it's still something to solve for, but it looks like it might be less of an issue than it was a year ago. Conversely, checkout experience is the number two, 35%, and that has actually increased. So checkout is that's why we are certainly making that a focus of this presentation, is because we heard it from our shoppers as well. I'm going to go really quickly. Shopping online, of our online shoppers, we saw something similar. Out of stock is also an issue, and it's actually more of a dominant issue in online shopping, is not having products out of stock. So something to continue to look to. Lastly, consumers, we presented those same more innovative, cutting edge grocery solutions to them to get their thoughts on what they've tried and what they're interested in. And they are open. They're very open. Again, some of these are so unique and new and not yet out there, as we saw from our retailer perspective, but there certainly is a willingness to try a lot of these. And so what we see in this chart in the blue is the dark is shoppers that say they've already used it and they use it regularly. And the lighter blue is would be willing to try it. And we see strong interest in trying things like smart carts, which we've definitely touched on. 64% said they would be willing to try it, which is a significant increase over the previous year. And then we see digital signage.
Maybe it's not a tiny sliver, like I said.
Well, they haven't tried it. but there's a curiosity. I think there's a curiosity based on how it was described. Yeah.
Right. Thanks, Beth.
Mm-hmm. And then just again, asking, we did it with the retailers. We required our shoppers as well to tell us what they're most interested in or what's most valuable to them. So on the left side, these are technologies they have actually experienced. And we said, well, which ones they're most valued? And 34% of shoppers said those self-checkout payment kiosks. So that's, for a third of them, that was their favorite. That's what they wanted. Voice-enabled technology for information or store assistance is tied with online grocery ordering for delivery, which is kind of surprising, but 13% each selected that. And the voice-enabled tech is an increase over last year. And, I didn't call it out here on the slide, but that is being driven by Gen X and Boomer shoppers. On the right side, where shoppers are willing to try it, they haven't experienced it yet, but they are interested in trying it. We see smart carts, number one, followed by in-store robots, 12%, which is an increase year over year. And also in-store QR codes is another one that we saw some significant gains in compared to last year. And I'm not going to read through all of these, but just to let you know, please do either take advantage of the recording, or I think that you're able to download the in the event resources. This presentation, we have some summary opportunities that we saw in the data for retailers to and solution providers for those of you listening in to action on the data that we heard from retailers and shoppers.
Beth, thank you so much. That was amazing, as I knew it would be. I mean, I would really encourage everyone watching today to please go and download this presentation, because it is just chock full of incredible data that is so important. So thank you again, Beth. So Amit, I just want to ask you, I don't think we're going to really have time for Q&A on this webinar, unfortunately, because there was just so much to get through. But I just want to ask you, just in closing, if you could just sort of double click on the whole checkout experience and, just do you have some kind of like summarizing narrative on checkout and where you see it going and all of that?
Absolutely. I would just say, just looking at some of the last few slides that Beth mentioned in terms of how self-checkout continues to be the top modality in terms of how the generations prefer, right? I'll go back to say that self-checkout is not just about a hardware sitting in a corner. It's a very thoughtful implementation of an experience. And that's where the retailers differentiate. It's about operational excellence. It's about laying out the best design, the best flow, and gathering the data to define and design that and continue to iterate that. Shoppers change, demographics change, and store also needs to evolve. And if the tech doesn't allow you to, then you have a wrong tech. And that's how we've designed, the self-checkout here at NCR and the experience around it. I'm right now in London, and I'm seeing it all around. It's a country where a nation has embraced self-service, and I've been into some stores here which are full self-checkout, by the way. That doesn't mean there isn't any host. Their host is giving valuable services. So we are very honored to work here with retailers. And I'll say, just take a step back, understand the outcome that you want to drive, and then design the front-end experience where checkout is a modality for your shoppers.
Thanks, Amit. Thank you very much. Beth, Amit, thank you both so much for your insights and your tremendous work on this webinar today.
Thank you.
Pleasure. Thank you.
And thanks everyone for attending today's webinar as well. Be sure to check out Progressive Grocer's slew of other webinars coming up in the next few weeks by going to progressivegrocer.com/webinars. If you have any questions for me, you can send me an email at g.acosta@ensembleiq.com. I really encourage you again to please go to the tab in our website where you can watch this webinar again and download this presentation, because trust me, you're going to want this data, this incredible data that Beth has worked so hard to produce. So I encourage you to do that. So thank you so much again for attending today's webinar, and goodbye.